Morning. So my goal this morning is actually to have a conversation. I'll spend a little bit of time explaining briefly why I'm running for president and who I am. But what I'd really like to do is take as many questions and have as much of a conversation with you all as we possibly can in the time. I'm running for president for a really simple reason. I think the government is broken. I think it's been purchased by corporations. I think it's stopped working for the people of the United States. And so the question is, if all of the things that Americans across the board want, affordable health care as a right for every American, quality public education beginning with preschool, clean air and clean water as a right for every American, a living wage so that one job is enough to support a family, they're not going to be available until we get back government of, by, and for the people. So the question in my mind is, who can actually do that fight? Who can beat the corporations? Who can effectively take back the government, lead the American people to take back our own government, which was designed by us for us? And let me say, for the last 10 years, what I've been doing is putting together coalitions of ordinary American citizens, like the people in this room, to stand up for our rights and beat unchecked corporate power. So for 10 years, I started taking on oil and gas companies who people thought were too rich, too well-connected, too ruthless to ever lose, and beating them. I've taken on tobacco companies, drug companies, utilities, and won. So when I look at this landscape, I don't look at a group of corporations who are unbeatable. I think the people of the United States, we have to rise up and demand that we get back our government. And that's what I'm running for president for. I watched those debates. I got in July because I thought, I don't need to run. There's so many people running. Somebody really good is going to pop out. And I listened to the debates, and the debates were not about how are we going to get any of this done. The debates were exactly which healthcare plan is better. And I have a strong opinion about that. Exactly which Green New Deal is better. I have a strong opinion about that. You know, which gun violence prevention program, which educational program, which immigration program. None of those is a new problem. A competent government would be arguing about it and getting something done on all of them. The question is, why is that not true in the United States of America? And the reason is, in every single one of those questions, there is a corporation that is making a lot of money not solving the problem, that where the existing situation works perfectly for them. And so if you think about gun violence, over 90% of Americans want background checks on guns, gun purchases, and have for a long time. We've never gotten it, and more Republicans than Democrats want it. 70% of NRA members want background checks on gun purchases. But the reason we don't have it is the NRA is actually controlled by gun manufacturers, and they like to sell guns. So they don't want any abrogation of their right to sell guns to whoever wants to pay for them. So, you know, I look at this and I say, I'm talking about structural changes in Washington, D.C. that no one else will even talk about. You know, I want term limits, 12 years for Congresspeople and senators. That if we want bold change, then we need new and different people in charge. We are not going to have it as long as we have Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and Chuck Grassley in charge. But you know, I am in favor of direct democracy. You know, in 26 states, including my home state, people can gather signatures, put them on the ballot, put it up for a vote, and if it passes, it's law. I believe in that. You know, if you ask me, who do you trust to solve these problems? Do you trust politicians or the people? My answer is, the last 10 years of my life have been about pushing power back to the people of the United States and away from the elites and special interests. And so I believe we should have that in the United States of America. I think we'd have background checks on every gun purchase in a week if we could do that. And I think that that is the thing that would give us a spur to let the people of the United States act on problems if the Congress won't. And so over the last 10 years, I've done that. When we took on the tobacco companies, they'd won 17 times in a row. We got a $2 a pack tax put on tobacco, and it went to Medi-Cal, which is healthcare for the lowest income Californians, $3 to $4 billion a year. I've closed a corporate tax loophole that our legislature wouldn't and gave the money to the public schools. We have an ability to change things, the people of the United States, that people in DC won't even think about or talk about. And the other thing you should know about the last 10 years, I started one of the largest grassroots organizations in the United States called Next Gen America. We have been organizing in Iowa since the beginning of 2014. In 2018, we did the largest youth voter mobilization in American history. We are on 41 campuses in the state of Iowa. We are on 3 campuses in the city of Dubuque. In 2018, Next Gen organized in 38 Republican districts, more than doubled the turnout of young people in those districts from 4 years prior, and 33 flipped. So when my whole theory about American politics is there are many more Democrats in this country than there are Republicans. The question is, who's going to vote? The Republicans always vote. Democrats, and I know this from talking personally to hundreds of young people, but also for our organization talking to hundreds of thousands or millions of young people, the reason they don't vote is always no one tells the truth. No one actually addresses the issues in my life that impact me and my friends. The system is broken, why would I vote? And that's the start of a conversation for us. Because in fact, if the people who don't vote, who are overwhelmingly Democrats, show up at the polls, we win everything. And so I also have Next Gen has a organization we founded with 7 labor unions, national labor unions, to go door to door to people who don't vote. We went to 15 million doors in 2016. We went to over 10 million doors in 2018. It's still going on because the idea is if everybody shows up, we win everything everywhere. So when I think about 2020, when I think about 2019, what's happened this year in Virginia, Kentucky, Louisiana, I think I don't need to convince 2% who can't decide what they think about Donald Trump. There's between 1.25% of Americans who don't vote because they think the system is broken, who agree with us on everything. And if they show up, we win everywhere. Young people vote 72 to 28 Democrat to Republican. 44-point spread. They don't have to be convinced. They only have to be convinced that it's important to show up, that democracy doesn't work if people stay at home. So let me take 1 second to talk about myself. Because I know that when I read about myself in the paper, sometimes I think I've changed my name legally to billionaire Tom Steyer. But actually, my mom was from Minneapolis. She was a school teacher in New York. She taught in the New York public schools. She taught remedial reading to prisoners in the Brooklyn House of Detention. Just so you know, we're in Iowa. My uncle was a professor for 45 years at the University of Iowa in Iowa City. And I'm going to go to my Aunt Betsy's 100th birthday on the 15th of December, i.e. next week, 8 days from now, in Iowa City. So I've been coming to Iowa to see, I've been organizing here on the ground and going to campuses and talking to young people for 6 years, but I've been going to see my family for a heck of a lot longer than 6 years, probably about 10 times that. So my dad was the first generation in his family to go to college. My grandfather was a plumber. My father became a lawyer. He left his law practice to go to World War II as a naval officer, which my parents are Depression-era World War II babies. Because he was a lawyer, he got assigned to prosecuting the Nazis after World War II, to prosecuting the war criminals. And what he said to me, and I have 2 older brothers, what he said to us growing up is, If you see something wrong in your society, at the heart of your society, the way there was in Germany in the 30s, then you should fight it every single day, and you should fight it as early as you see it. And honestly, that's exactly why I started the Need to Impeach movement in October of 2017. There's something really wrong at the heart of American society, and I felt like the American people need to have our voice be heard. Over 8 million people signed that petition, and what we're seeing now is what I've asked for, which is publicly televised hearings so we all can see what's happened. I always say to people, the court that matters in impeachment is the court of public opinion. If the people of Iowa decide this is the most corrupt president in American history and he needs to go, then that's the only thing, it's quite clear, that's going to convince Joni Ernst that she should vote to remove him from office. Is if the people of Iowa say, get rid of him or we'll get rid of you. And this is going to be a vote that is going to be, look, every senator is going to carry this vote to their grave. This isn't going to be something that gets washed away. This is going to be a vote that's a career-defining vote for every one of them. And so people are going to have to, they think that they, and it may turn out that it just goes down, that they hold a partisan line, but the people of America ultimately get the choice on this. They get the choice at the time, and they get the choice afterwards to determine what they think about that. So the last thing I want to say is this, and then I'd really like to, I hope you're preparing some brutal questions for a Saturday morning. Look, we don't have a broken country, we have a broken government. We have two big challenges in front of us. One is to take back our government. And we are going to have to aggressively do it, and I will, with incredible pleasure, lead that charge. Because I think what I see is a government that is being cruel to Americans across the board. And it makes me crazy, honestly. You know, I was talking to some nurses in mental health facilities in Iowa a month ago. Unionized nurses who weren't getting overtime that they deserved, had their raises removed, were treated abominably. They were getting beat up at work and fired for getting beat up. And they were told that if you ever talk about this outside of work, you'll be fired for talking about it, for telling the truth. We're seeing education cuts. Look, the Republicans do something, and they're doing it in Iowa. Cut taxes on rich people and corporations, which they always do. This is the Trump economic thing, but it's in every red state. Cut taxes on rich people and corporations. Cut education, K-12 and higher ed. Cut health care for Americans. Allow as much pollution as corporations want, and go after working people through organized labor and unions, and by taking away their rights generally. That's their move. And it's really cruelty at every level for money. And when you see it up close, whether it's kids who aren't getting the education they deserve, people who aren't getting the health care they need, working people who are being abused, people who are being poisoned, it's upsetting. I mean, we use a lot of fancy words about this, but it's actually just cruelty. It's unnecessary. We can have the rights of Americans in the 21st century give us a guaranteed lifestyle better than anyone in history. We're not in trouble. We have the ability to do that right now. And so the first thing is we need to take back this government and make sure it ensures the rights of Americans in the 21st century. And the second thing is we need to control this climate crisis. I've said it's my #1 priority. It's a perfect example of a broken government. How is it possible that the federal government has never passed climate legislation? Ever. And it's not really even being discussed in a serious way. The answer is oil and gas companies don't want it to happen because they like making tens of billions of dollars a year, and that's it. You know, I literally was talking to a national magazine, to their editorial board, and you go into a room, and there are about 10 to 15 editors, and they just pepper you with questions. It's in Washington, D.C., and this guy goes, do you really believe that you can get something done on climate? And I was like, we have to get something done on climate. It's my #1 priority. I'm going to declare a state of emergency. He goes, do you really think oil companies will let you do something on climate? And I was like, yes, we have to do something on climate. I'm going to do something on climate come hell or high water. And he goes, let me tell you something. The oil companies will never let you do that. And I'm thinking, am I in the United States of America? Can you imagine someone seriously telling you that we can't protect the health and safety of Americans because some company doesn't want that to happen? That's ridiculous. And he was dead serious. But if we do those two things, take back the government and arrest this climate crisis, we are in the best position of any people in the history of this planet. That means we've succeeded in terms of what Americans are supposed to do, which is leave the country better than we found it. We will leave the country for the next generation better than we found it. And since when have Americans said, oh, we have a challenge, let's not do it? We're going to have to do it, but we can deal with climate and create millions and millions of good-paying union jobs across this country. This can revive us economically. We can do it and clean the air and water, particularly in low-income communities, in black and brown communities where there's the most air pollution and water pollution, but there's water pollution in the state of Iowa. There's a ton of it. We can use this to end that. And we can also use it to reinvent the whole idea of what America stands for, to go back to the idea that we lead the world morally, we lead the world technologically, commercially, and financially. And if you look at this country, people say to me all the time, we're so divided. What are you going to do to pull us together? And I listen to people saying, the way we're going to pull together is I'm different and I'm good at relating to Republicans. It's like, really? Because I thought President Obama was pretty good at relating to people, and he never got a break. What I say is this, how about if we take on the biggest challenge in history together and succeed? We have to do it, but you know something that's really fun in this world? Winning. I love winning, and we have to win in this. And if we do this together, you ask me what's going to pull Americans together? That. Taking a gigantic challenge that redefines who we are in a really good way, and then doing it together. That's actually how we're going to come together in this world, and that's actually what I intend to do. Thank you very much.